The heavy oak doors of courtroom 3A creaked shut behind her, sealing away the echoes of judgment and whispered scandal. Samantha Evans moved down the marble hallway with her head held high, each click of her heels sounding sharper than gunfire. The judge's ruling should have felt like victory. Her law practice was hers, her assets untouched, her dignity intact. She had beaten Daniel Whitmore and his army of attorneys, beaten the legacy of a family that had tried to grind her into dust. Yet, as she drew in a breath of air that tasted faintly of dust and disinfectant, the triumph felt hollow, like a crown made of ash pressed against her brow. She did not turn back when Daniel called her name, his voice straining with false charm, dripping with arrogance that refused to die. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what he looked like. Jaw tight, hair perfectly arranged, his expensive suit cut from the kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle even under the weight of defeat. Behind him, she could picture Eleanor Whitmore's icy eyes narrowing, her manicured fingers dialing furiously to summon reinforcements. That family lived on legacy, connections, and the quiet destruction of anyone foolish enough to stand against them. But Samantha had stood. She had fought. She had won. And still, inside her chest, the victory tasted like nothing. The sunlight outside the courthouse hit her like a slap, bright and merciless against the pale Denver sky. She descended the grand staircase, clutching the railing with one hand, the other tightening around her leather briefcase like it contained her last breath. A chill breeze cut through the air, biting against her skin, and for the first time that day, she felt the weight of the last 2 years pressing down on her shoulders. The sleepless nights, the late hours combing through files, the humiliation of Daniel's affairs dragged into the open. All of it collapsing upon her at once. She told herself to keep moving, to make it to the car parked 6 blocks away because she had been too proud to pay for courthouse parking and too broke to afford it anyway. But her legs betrayed her. They trembled beneath her like fragile glass columns, each step heavier than the last. She reached the halfway point of the steps before her breath came in jagged bursts, her heart thundering against her ribs. The world tilted sideways, gray spots dancing in the corners of her vision. Not here, she thought, not in front of them. But her body gave her no choice. Her knees buckled, and the marble stairs rose up to meet her. For a split second, she tasted the bitter sting of defeat, not in court, but in life itself. Collapsing here would be the final satisfaction for Daniel and his family, a picture of Samantha Evans brought low when she had sworn she would never bend. And then, before the hard stone could claim her, warmth enveloped her. Strong arms caught her mid-fall, steady and certain, lifting her with a gentleness that made her breath stutter. The scent of clean soap and flannel wrapped around her, grounding her against the chaos inside her chest. Her blurred vision lifted toward a face she could hardly see, storm-gray eyes locked on hers, filled with concern so raw and unguarded that it broke through her haze of pain. His voice was deep, steady, and it rumbled through her like a promise she hadn't realized she was waiting for. "I've got you." The words settled over her trembling body like armor, words spoken not as a courtesy but as a vow. And as the crowd around the courthouse gasped, murmuring and craning for a better view, Samantha realized she was not falling anymore. She was being held, shielded against the world, by a stranger who had stepped out of nowhere to catch her in her moment of collapse. And something inside whispered that her story was no longer hers alone. The courthouse steps buzzed with curious whispers as Samantha struggled to steady her breath. The stranger's arms felt too strong, too sure, like the world itself had been holding its breath and sent him in that exact moment to catch her. She wanted to protest, to insist she was fine, but the words tangled in her throat. His grip didn't falter. His chest rose steady against her cheek, a rhythm so calm it seemed to silence the storm inside her. Daniel's voice cut through the noise. "Samantha, what's happening?" He pushed forward through the crowd, confusion etched on his polished face. For the first time since she had known him, he looked shaken. But before Samantha could even part her lips, the stranger's voice cut sharp and certain, carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs around them. "She's my wife." The words struck like thunder. The crowd gasped. Daniel froze mid-step. Eleanor Whitmore, elegant as ice, actually stumbled as her phone slipped from her hand. Samantha's heart lurched. She tried to lift her head, to correct him, but the look in his storm-gray eyes stopped her cold. Fierce, protective, unyielding. Whoever he wasn't saying it for attention. He was saying it like it was truth. Her body still weak, Samantha found herself swept into the back of an ambulance, the stranger never letting go of her hand. She tried to speak, to ask him why he had said it, but the EMTs swarmed around them, checking her vitals. All the while, the man sat with unshakable determination, his palm warm against hers, his presence a shield against the chaos. The ride blurred past in flashes. Daniel's face pale in the courthouse crowd, Eleanor's gasp, the sound of sirens. But the one detail that stayed sharp in her mind was the stranger's eyes, calm and stormy all at once, looking at her not like she was broken, but like she was precious. At the hospital, under the harsh flow, "Fluorescent lights," she finally found her voice. "Why did you say that? Why would you call me your wife?" He hesitated, just long enough to make her chest tighten. Then he leaned closer, his voice low, meant only for her. "Because he was looking at you like you were still his possession. Because he was reaching for you like you were something he could take back. And I couldn't stand there and let him." Samantha blinked at him, her throat tight. "You don't even know me." He shook his head, the corner of his mouth curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I know enough. I know you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. And I know no one should ever have to face it alone." She should have pulled back, should have insisted on the truth. But as exhaustion pulled at her body, as her heart ached with bruises that went deeper than bone, Samantha found herself holding on tighter to his hand instead. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was falling, and she couldn't help but wonder who exactly this man was. The stranger who had caught her, claimed her, and in a single heartbeat turned her life into a story far more dangerous and powerful than any courtroom battle she had ever fought. Rain tapped against the wide hospital windows as if the sky itself carried her sorrow. Samantha stirred beneath crisp white sheets, her head heavy, her body still drained from the collapse. For a moment she thought she was alone, but then she heard it. A low voice, steady and warm, telling some story about a broken car engine and people begging him for help after ignoring his warnings. It was the voice she had heard on the courthouse steps, the voice that had said the impossible words that still echoed in her mind. She opened her eyes slowly, and there he was, sitting in the hard plastic chair at her bedside as if it were a throne he had chosen willingly. His frame filled the small space, but his storm-gray eyes were softened by something she couldn't quite name. Relief flickered across his face as their gazes met. "You're awake," he said, and the gentleness in his tone made her pulse quicken. Samantha tried to sit up, but her muscles trembled in protest. He was at her side in an instant, adjusting the bed controls with careful hands that bore the marks of real work. Calloused palms, strength built not in a boardroom, but in labor. Yet there was nothing clumsy about his touch. Every movement told her she mattered. "The doctor said you were dehydrated and exhausted," he explained. "When is the last time you had a real meal?" She thought about it, shame burning in her chest. 2 days ago, maybe. His jaw clenched, a flash of something dangerous sparking in his eyes before he pulled it back under control. Then his expression softened again, but she had seen it, the fury of a man who couldn't stand the thought of her suffering. "You know my name," she said quietly, testing him. "Nathan," he replied without hesitation. "Nathan Brooks." She repeated it softly, the syllables strange and steady on her tongue. "Nathan." And then the memory crashed into her. His words on the courthouse. Steps. His voice announcing her as his wife. The weight of them returned, heavier now in the stillness of this room. Her chest tightened as she whispered the question. "Why did you say that?" For a long moment he was silent. Then he leaned closer, his voice lower than a whisper, his eyes burning into hers with unshakable conviction. "Because he looked at you like you were something he owned. Because that man who betrayed you still thought you were his to control. I couldn't let that stand. I had to make him believe you were untouchable." her lips parted, breath catching as the truth sank in. Untouchable. No one had ever made her feel that way, not even Daniel when she thought he loved her. "But you don't even know me," she managed. He leaned back slightly, though his gaze never left her. "Maybe not yet, but I want to. And I'll tell you something else. Even if I had only known you for a heartbeat, I would still have done it." Before she could reply, the nurse bustled in carrying a tray. Homemade soup, fresh bread, far too good to be from the hospital kitchen. "Mrs. Brooks," the nurse said with a cheerful smile, "your husband insisted on ordering real food for you." Samantha froze, heat rushing to her face. She looked at Nathan, startled, but he only gave a small shrug, his mouth tilting with the faintest hint of a smile. "It keeps the story consistent," he murmured, though the faint color on his neck betrayed the weight of what he had just accepted. A lie turned into a living truth, at least for now. Samantha stared at him across the bed, her pulse racing with fear and something dangerously close to hope. Who was this man who caught her, claimed her, and now sat beside her as if he belonged? And why did she feel with every breath that her life had just stepped into a storm she was not ready for, but could no longer resist? The smell of fresh paint lingered in the air, sharp and sweet, clinging to Samantha's skin as she leaned against the wall of her new apartment. The divorce had stripped her of so much, but at least these four walls were hers. They were cracked, dingy, and in desperate need of love, but they belonged to her alone. She told herself she would fix them slowly, patch by patch, paycheck by paycheck. She hadn't counted on Nathan showing up with a borrowed truck, a battered toolbox, and a stubborn determination to help. "You don't have to do this," she told him, watching as he spread plastic sheets across the living room floor like a soldier preparing for battle. "I know," he said, glancing at her with that calm certainty that always seemed to silence her doubts. "But I want to." Her pride bristled. "I can handle it." "With what money, Samantha?" he asked gently. "You just burned through everything fighting for your freedom. Let me do this." Something in his voice disarmed her. He wasn't pitying her, wasn't talking down to her. He was offering, and for the first time in years, she let herself accept. "Fine," she said, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. "But I'm helping." "Good," he said, pulling a package from his truck and handing it to her. Inside was a pair of worn jeans, a soft shirt, and boots that had seen their share of work. His eyes softened. "I figured you needed something that wasn't connected to him, something that feels like yours." Her throat tightened as she looked down at the clothes. He had noticed what even she hadn't realized, that she couldn't rebuild her life while wearing the shadows of her past. Minutes later, she emerged dressed like a woman reborn, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, ready to face the blank canvas of her walls. Nathan was already prying open a can of sage green paint, the color warm and calm, like home. "How did you know?" she asked, genuine else. "I surprised." "I pay attention," he said simply. "You like colors that feel alive." They worked side by side, the silence between them filled with the soft scrape of brushes and the occasional hum from Nathan as he moved with quiet ease. Samantha found herself stealing glances at him, at the way his broad shoulders flexed beneath his flannel shirt, at the way he treated the smallest details with care. He painted like every stroke mattered, like this space deserved to be beautiful. "What kind of work do you actually do?" she asked, curiosity slipping past her guard. "Different projects," he said vaguely, though his precision with the brush and the way he spoke of structure revealed far more knowledge than a simple laborer might have. Residential mostly, whatever pays the bills. But his eyes clouded for a moment, and Samantha sensed an untold truth hovering beneath the surface. He had the air of someone carrying secrets, heavy ones, but for now, she let it go. By the time the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline, the living room had transformed. The walls glowed with warmth, the space breathing like it finally belonged to her. Samantha stood in the center, awe softening her face. "It's beautiful." "We make a good team," Nathan said, stepping closer, his voice low. Her heart stuttered as his calloused hands brushed a stray streak of paint from her cheek. For a moment, the world went still, their breaths mingling in the charged air. Then his words came, quiet but heavy, cutting straight into her chest. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this becomes, I'm in it completely. She should have been afraid. She should have pulled back. But instead, Samantha let herself lean into the warmth of his touch, the steadiness of his promise, and for the first time in years, she felt the terrifying spark of something new. Not safety, not control, hope. Yet even as his lips brushed hers in a kiss that tasted of paint and possibility, somewhere deep in Nathan's storm-gray eyes was a flicker she didn't yet see. A flicker that hinted he wasn't telling her everything. And when she finally discovered the truth, it would be the very thing that could either destroy her or save her completely. The courthouse towered above her like a monument to judgment, its marble pillars casting long shadows across the steps where Samantha stood with a case file pressed against her chest. Her hands shook as if the weight of the folder were heavier than stone. Inside were documents that could change everything for her client, Isabella Torres, a young mother fighting a brutal custody battle against her wealthy husband. It was Samantha's biggest case since her own divorce, and every nerve in her body screamed at her that failure was not an option. She whispered to herself as if the words could steady her breathing. You can do this. You have to do this. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and when she pulled it out, his name lit the screen. Nathan. How are you feeling about today? His message read. She hesitated, then typed with trembling fingers, terrified. What if I'm not good enough? What if I let her down? His reply came so fast it was as if he had been waiting, watching the clock for her response. You won't. You're the most brilliant lawyer I know. She stared at the words, her chest tightening. I'm the only lawyer you know, she typed back, trying for lightness but failing. That doesn't make it less true. You've got this, beautiful. I believe in you. The screen blurred as tears stung her eyes. He didn't say he hoped she could do it. He said he believed it as if her victory was already written in stone. For a moment, her fear loosened its grip on her lungs. I love you, she typed suddenly before she could stop herself. The words appeared on the screen, and she froze, horrified. They hadn't spoken those words aloud yet. Not officially, not clearly, but it was the truth. Her phone rang almost instantly. She answered, her breath shaky. Do you mean that? His voice asked, deep and steady through the line. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I love you, Nathan. I know it's too soon, but I do. Thank God, he breathed, and she could hear the raw relief in his voice. Because I love you too. I've been dying to say it. Her knees nearly buckled right there on the courthouse steps. The words wrapped around her like armor, like light. Good, he continued, because you need to be brave today. And every time you feel afraid, I'll be there in the gallery. Look at me and remember that you are magnificent. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he couldn't take off work, couldn't lose money he needed for himself. But before she could form the words, he had already promised. Nothing is more important to me than being there for you. Nothing. 2 hours later, she stood before the judge, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger as her argument unfolded. She spoke of Isabella Torres not as a poor woman abandoned, but as a mother fierce in her love. She spoke of children who deserved safety and compassion rather than wealth as a measure of worth. And when her courage faltered, her eyes found Nathan sitting in the back, his gaze locked on her, unwavering. He didn't nod or smile. He simply believed. And that belief poured strength into her veins. When the judge ruled in Isabella's favor, the room erupted in a murmur of surprise and protest. Samantha swayed on her feet, dizzy with relief, and then she saw him pushing through the crowd. His arms closed around her with a force that told the world she was his, and his voice, rough with pride, whispered against her hair. You did it. You were extraordinary. We did it, she corrected, her hands clinging to him. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, he said, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. But I'm glad you didn't have to. The words seared into her heart like a vow. Yet beneath the triumph, a shadow stirred. Nathan Brooks was a man who claimed her with conviction, who fueled her fire with his belief. But what would happen when she learned the truth about the world he came from? A truth powerful enough to shatter everything she thought she knew about love. The bag sat open on her bed, clothes spilling over the edges in a nervous mess that mirrored the chaos in her chest. Samantha Evans had packed and repacked 3 times already, telling herself it was just a weekend camping trip. Just a tent, a fire, and a man she was still learning to trust. But when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a woman preparing for a casual getaway. She saw someone standing on the edge of a cliff, about to leap. Nathan had planned everything, refusing to tell her where they were going, only that she would need warm clothes, hiking boots, and an open mind. She had tried to laugh it off, but the truth was her heart raced with anticipation and fear. This wasn't Daniel's world of 5-star hotels and tailored vacations designed to impress. This was different, simpler, honest. And for that very reason, it felt far more dangerous. Her phone buzzed with his message. "Ready for our adventure. I'm downstairs." She typed back quickly. "Coming now. I packed too much." "We'll figure it out," he replied. "I love you." Her fingers trembled as she wrote back, "I love you too." The words still felt foreign and yet familiar, like a song she had known all her life but had forgotten until now. When she stepped outside, he was leaning against his truck, hands shoved in his pockets, hair wind-tousled, looking like every dream she'd ever tried to bury. The sight of him sent heat rushing through her chest. He reached for her bag without asking, sliding it effortlessly into the truck bed, and kissed her as if the whole city could disappear and he wouldn't notice. "You've never been camping, have you?" he teased as he helped her climb into the passenger seat. "Never," she admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "That's what makes it perfect," he said, his hand brushing hers as he started the engine. "We'll figure it out together." The city lights faded behind them, replaced by rolling hills and golden aspens swaying like dancers in the wind. Nathan sang softly with the radio, his voice warm, unpolished, and somehow more comforting than silence. Samantha caught herself staring, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he glanced at her. "What are you thinking?" he asked when he caught her gaze lingering too long. "That I never thought I could feel this happy," she whispered before she could stop herself. "That I never thought I'd be safe again." His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and for a flicker of a moment, something pained crossed his expression. But then he looked at her with such intensity that it stole her breath. "You'll always be safe with me, Samantha. Always." They turned down a dirt road, and 20 minutes later the truck rolled into a clearing that looked as though it had been carved out of a dream. A lake sparkled beneath the last light of sunset, aspen trees stood in golden rings around the campsite, and the air smelled of pine and promise. Samantha stepped out, stunned. "Nathan, this is incredible." "I hoped you'd like it," he said, his voice almost shy. "I wanted to give you something beautiful." "It's perfect," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Absolutely perfect." That night, wrapped in blankets beside a crackling fire, Samantha leaned against him as stars spilled across the sky. The lake shimmered with their reflection, and in the hush of the wilderness, her fears felt distant, almost forgotten. "Tell me your dreams," she murmured. "The real on." He was silent for a long time, staring into the flames. "I dream of building something lasting. A family. A home filled with love. Of waking up next to the woman I love and knowing she'll never doubt how much she means to me." Her throat tightened as she turned to him. "You already are that man. You already are everything I've been waiting for." He pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you so much. It scares me sometimes." "You don't have to be scared, Nathan," she whispered, kissing him with all the certainty she had left. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm yours." Under the vast Colorado sky, their bodies came together with a passion that felt like a vow. Every kiss, every touch, whispered promises of forever. But when Samantha fell asleep in his arms, her heart steady for the first time in years. Nathan stared at the stars with a secret burning in his chest. He had given her the simplicity she craved, but the truth of who he really was loomed closer with every breath. And when she discovered it, this paradise might be the very thing that shattered them both. Rain streaked down the windows of Samantha's apartment, the storm outside thrumming like a restless heartbeat. The lights were low, candles flickering on the table, their glow casting soft shadows across the walls Nathan had painted with his own hands. He had insisted on cooking her dinner, claiming that his promotion at work deserved a quiet celebration. She laughed at first, teasing him about burning pasta, but now she swayed in his arms in the living room, the faint hum of music filling the air. Her head rested against his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat calming her nerves. She tilted her face upward, her eyes searching his. "Tell me everything. What does this promotion really mean?" Nathan's arms tightened around her, and she felt the tension ripple through his body. "It's nothing exciting," he said carefully. "Just more responsibility, a little more pay." "More pay." She arched a brow, pulling back slightly. "Enough that you're talking about moving in together?" His expression softened, but his eyes held something restless, something shadowed. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. This isn't just about money. It's about us." Her heart fluttered, yet a chill crept down her spine. Nathan looked as though he was holding back a storm. "There's something I need to tell you," he said suddenly, guiding her to the couch. His hands never left hers, but his voice dropped low, weighed down by secrets. "This promotion, it's more than I made it sound. It comes with chances, opportunities I didn't think I'd have." "Opportunities," she echoed, her suspicion sharpening. What kind of opportunities could a construction supervisor possibly mean? His jaw tightened. "What if I told you I might have access to more resources than I let on? What if I could help you build that legal clinic sooner than you ever thought possible?" Samantha froze, her pulse quickening. Her hands slipped from his grip. "Resources? You're talking like you've been hiding something. Nathan, are you lying to me about money?" "Not lying," he said quickly, panic flashing in his eyes. "Just not telling you everything." Her chest tightened as if the storm outside had seeped into her bones. "That's the same thing. I told you I can't survive another relationship built on lies." Nathan reached for her, his voice breaking. "I was scared. Scared you'd think I was just another rich man trying to buy your affection. I wanted you to see me, not my bank account." Her breath caught, fury and heartbreak clashing inside her. "So which one is it? The man I love who wears thrift store shirts and works construction, or the man I don't know hiding behind half-truths?" He stepped closer, desperation in every airy line of his face. "Both. They're both me. The money doesn't change who I am inside. My love for you is the only truth that matters." She searched his eyes, looking for the man who had caught her when she fell, the man who whispered promises under the stars. But what she saw was fear, and behind it, something that looked dangerously like desperation. "I don't need wealth, Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need honesty. I need to know the man I'm building my life with is real." He cupped her face, his hands warm against her skin. "I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. That is the truth. Please believe that." Her tears burned hot as she looked at him, torn between trust and doubt. For the first time since meeting him, she wondered if the man she had given her heart to was hiding behind a mask. And as thunder rolled across the Denver sky, Samantha realized this love story was no longer just about passion and promises. It was about survival, and the truth waiting to shatter everything. The morning started like any other. Samantha sat in her favorite coffee shop, case files spread across the table, her pen tapping against the pages as she prepared for a hearing. She reached for her cup, expecting the familiar comfort of warmth, but her hand froze when her eyes drifted to the television mounted above the counter. The headline crawled across the screen in bold letters. "Tech mogul Nathan Brooks receives humanitarian award." Her heart stopped. The man on the screen was polished, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than her yearly rent, his smile confident as he shook hands with governors and business leaders. His stormy blue eyes, the very ones that had promised her safety, now stared out at the world from behind a podium. It couldn't be, but it was. Nathan Brooks, CEO of Brooks Technologies, estimated net worth billions. Her cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Coffee spread across her shoes, but she couldn't move. Every detail she had ignored suddenly blazed in her mind. The way he always seemed to have the right tools, the way he planned their camping trip with precision, the ease with which he talked about resources, opportunities, possibilities. He hadn't been a construction worker struggling to make ends meet. He had been lying to her from the very beginning. The room spun. Her lungs tightened as if she had been shoved underwater. She bolted from the shop, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the concerned voices. Her car felt like a cage as she fumbled for her phone. His name flashed across the screen before she could even call him. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tonight. I love you." Her hands shook as she typed back. "I know who you are." The phone rang instantly. His voice poured through the speaker, frantic, raw. "Samantha, please let me explain." Explain what her voice was ice. Explain how you made me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist. "I never lied about loving you," he said desperately. "That was always real. Please just see me. See us." "I'm outside your building," she whispered, her voice breaking as she hung up. Minutes later, she stood in the gleaming lobby of Brooks Technologies. Marble floors stretched out like a kingdom built on power. Executives in tailored suits passed her without a glance. The receptionist barely blinked when she announced herself. "Mr. Brooks is waiting," she said smoothly, leading her to a private elevator. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished brass as the elevator rose. She barely recognized herself. A woman betrayed, a woman whose heart had been played like a game. When the doors opened, the sight that greeted her stole the breath from her lungs. Nathan stood at the window of his office, the mountains stretching behind him like a painted masterpiece. His suit was sharp, his posture commanding, every inch of him belonging to this world of wealth and power. Yet when he turned, his eyes were the same stormy blue that had once made her feel safe. "Samantha," he said, his voice full of anguish. "Thank you for coming." "Don't!" she snapped, her chest rising and falling with fury. "Don't thank me. Don't act like this is some kind of reunion." He stepped closer, hands outstretched. "Please, just let me explain." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "Can you explain how every kiss, every promise, every dream was built on lies? Can you explain how the man I loved was nothing more than a mask you created?" His voice cracked, tears rising. "I lied about money, about work, yes. But I never lied about you. I never lied about us. I love you, Samantha. That's the only truth that matters." Her heart ached, torn between the memory of the man who had held her when she collapsed and the stranger standing before her now. "You don't understand," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "You didn't just betray me. You destroyed the only thing I believed in." Thunder rolled outside the windows as the storm broke over the city. And in that moment, Samantha realized the love that had once felt like salvation might now become her greatest ruin. 3 months passed like a slow bleed, every day dragging Samantha further into a hollow existence she barely recognized. The woman who once stood tall in a courtroom now found herself staring at empty walls, her fire dimmed. The sage green paint Nathan had brushed onto her apartment should have felt comforting, but instead it pressed down on her like a cage, a reminder of the love she had lost and the lies that had broken her. Nathan, meanwhile, sat high above Denver in his glass tower, staring at the city lights with whiskey untouched at his desk. The skyline was no longer a crown of victory, but a prison of glass and steel. He had built an empire, but the only foundation he truly cared about had crumbled in his arms. At 2 a.m, silence was his only companion until his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant glowed on the screen. "The foundation paperwork is ready for your signature. The Samantha Evans Foundation for Women's Legal Aid will launch next week." Nathan's chest tightened. He had poured $50 million into her dream, but he ordered his assistant to keep his name hidden. Samantha could never know. She wanted nothing to do with his wealth, nothing to do with him. This would be his penance, his way of protecting her even from afar. But fate had sharper claws than either of them expected. One night, as Nathan nursed his solitude, his office door opened and in stumbled Daniel Whitmore, Samantha's ex-husband. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and the smell of alcohol clung to him like a shadow. Nathan rose instantly, rage flashing in his stormy eyes. "What the hell do you want?" Daniel's voice slurred, his words jagged. "I want to talk about Samantha. I want to know what you did to her." Nathan's fists clenched, his body coiled. "I don't owe you anything." "She's destroyed," Daniel snapped, his voice trembling between anger and despair. "I saw her at the courthouse last week. She looks like a ghost." "What did you do, Nathan?" Nathan's laugh was hollow, bitter. "Me? I ruined her. You cheated on her, humiliated her, tried to strip her of everything she had." Daniel's face twisted in pain, but his eyes were sharp. "At least I never lied about who I was. You built your love on deception. You made her fall for a man who doesn't even exist." The words hit Nathan like a blade. He wanted to deny it, to shout Daniel down, but the truth sat heavy in his chest. Daniel leaned closer, his voice low and venomous. "Maybe she will forgive me before she forgives you. At least she knows who I am." After Daniel stumbled out, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It carried Daniel's words, dripping with poison and possibility. Nathan dropped back into his chair, head in his hands, the weight of his lies crushing him. Across town, Samantha's phone buzzed with an unexpected call. Daniel again. His voice was softer now, sober, broken. "I've been in therapy. I've been sober 3 months. I know I ruined everything, Samantha, but seeing you fall apart over another man is killing me. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't throw away love because you're too afraid to forgive." She ended the call with shaking hands, her mind a storm of voices. Nathan's pleas, her mother's warnings, Daniel's confession. And the next morning, when a woman named Margaret Thompson appeared in her office holding a folder stamped with the words, "The Samantha Evans Foundation," Samantha felt her world tilt again. $50 million, a legal aid clinic in her name, an anonymous donor. Her heart knew before her mind could argue. Nathan. The choice loomed over her like a storm about to break. To accept meant tying herself once more to the man who shattered her. To refuse meant walking away from the dream she had fought for her entire life. Samantha Evans, the woman who never backed down in a courtroom, now faced the most impossible case of all, the case of her own heart. The day her mother took her last breath, Samantha learned the cruelest truth of all. Pride could cost you everything. She had spent 3 weeks by her mother's side, watching the strongest woman she had ever known fade into a frail whisper of herself. And on that final afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the hospice window, her mother gripped Samantha's hand and whispered words that cut deeper than any wound. "I lost Charles not because he betrayed us, but because I was too proud to forgive him. He begged, he pleaded, he tried to make it right, but I was too scared to trust love again. And I spent 30 years alone because of it. Don't make my mistake. Don't throw away the man who loves you just because you're afraid." Samantha left that room shattered but also reborn, grief and clarity braided together in her chest like fire and smoke. 3 days later, she stood before the glittering tower of Brooks Technologies, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She had signed the foundation papers, yes, but that was not why she had come. She wasn't here for $50 million or for a dream painted on paper. She was here to reclaim something far rarer. The elevator ride felt eternal, the numbers glowing one by one as her reflection stared back at her in the polished brass walls. When the doors slid open, she saw him standing at the window, back turned, shoulders slumped, as if the empire behind him weighed him down instead of lifting him up. He turned when he heard her step, and in his stormy eyes she saw shock, hope, and pain collide. Samantha. His voice was a broken prayer. She stepped forward, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. I came to thank you for the foundation, for giving me the chance to help women who need it most. You don't need to thank me, Nathan said quickly, his voice thick with regret. You need the truth. You need what I should have given you from the start. Her eyes blazed, not with fury this time, but with raw honesty. Yes, you should have. You lied to me, Nathan. You let me fall in love with someone who wasn't real. But answer me this. Did you ever lie about loving me? Never, he said, the word torn from him like blood. Did you ever lie about wanting to build a life with me? No. His voice grew firmer, his gaze locked on hers. Every dream I spoke, every promise I made, I meant. She drew closer, tears stinging her eyes. Then maybe you didn't destroy everything. Maybe you just made the most foolish mistake of your life. He stepped forward, desperation and hope warring in his face. Samantha, I love you. I have loved you every second, and I will love you until my last breath. Please, please tell me it isn't too late. Her voice trembled, but did not break. My mother died with regret, Nathan. She pushed away the man who loved her because she was too afraid to forgive. I don't want to live with that kind of regret. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the rain against the glass. Then she said the words that shattered his despair. I still love you. I never stopped. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hands cradling her face as if she were something fragile and sacred. Marry me, Samantha. Not someday. Not after apologies. Marry me now. Marry me forever. She laughed through tears, the sound raw and beautiful. Yes. Yes, Nathan, I will. He dropped to his knees, pulling a velvet box from his pocket, the ring he had carried every day since she left. Her hand shook as he slid it onto her finger, and when their lips met, the storm inside and outside broke into something new. Forgiveness. Passion. A love reborn from ashes. Months later, when Samantha walked down the aisle in her mother's gown, Nathan waited with eyes full of tears and promise. The vows they spoke were not about wealth or power. They were about truth, about choosing each other every day, about building a life not on lies, but on courage. And as they kissed to seal their marriage, Samantha knew she had reclaimed more than a husband. She had reclaimed her throne, her dignity, her future. The queen had fallen, yes, but now she rose again with her king by her side. And together they would rule a kingdom built
And
not
that
on
wraps
money,
up today's story.
not on fear,
Now we want to hear
but on
from
love
you.
strong enough to
Where are you
survive
watching
even
from?
the weight of truth.
Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.